I'm president of the Century Club for one more month, and I can't wait. This is my second time around, and I feel like part of a Survivor series. But I want to turn this program over to Joanne Kavulich, who's in charge. But I want to invite you, we have a booklet to sign, and we have applications.
Is your microphone on?
Newsletter? Okay.
Is your microphone
Is it on?
I think it is, but it's not.
Yes, it's on, okay.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hand this over to Joanne.
Maybe come forward a little bit if you have trouble hearing.
Well, let's see if we can get it working, and then I will, if I need to thank you.
Can you all hear me?
All right.
Closer. Closer.
Can you all hear me now?
It'll be closer.
Is it plugged in?
Yeah, it's working. Just closer to your mouth.
What about your bottom lip?
It's on my, I don't know how to do all this.
It's on, but it needs to be
Hello.
Better.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our fireside chat entitled Coming to America. If you are like myself, I'm always interested in people who come from foreign lands. I often ask myself, how are they able to learn the language, the customs, the money exchange, etc. so quickly? Their navigational skills and survival skills are something to be admired. Tonight we will learn about a German immigrant, Uta Dreher, and her navigational skills and survival skills on both sides of the pond. How she survived in her country of Germany under the Nazis and the communistic rule. We will also learn of her survival experiences as she arrived here in America in the turbulent decade of the 60s. We are delighted to have with us this evening Uta, and we would like to give her a warm welcome to her, and she is a club member of our organization here, the Century Club. Before we begin, I would ask if you would all turn off your cell phones, and also there is a sign-in book on the small table in the back. Please sign because we need numbers for attendance. Okay, so please welcome our speaker, Uta Dreher.
Thank you all for coming, and unexpected so many people, and it was a fireside chat, which I thought I'd just sit here with a couple of people around, but then they gave me a microphone to walk around with, so it's okay. And again, thanks for coming, that's number one. Number two, thanks for the club and all its wonderful workers and volunteers to preserve this beautiful building and have us accommodate us all, not only for a lecture, but also with wonderful food afterwards. And number three, to Dadi, who came up with the topic, and Marie von Trapp and Dadi both. Marie, von Trapp, when she came over, they had all these girls, and in those days, most of you won't remember that the hemline went up and down and up and down. Any of you remember that? So, and Maria von Trapp, she said, the heck with that. No, she didn't say the heck. But she said, I'm going to put my girls into these kind of dresses. They are always the same length, and they are durable, and she sewed them for the oldest, and then they went down to the youngest, and whatever need was, they prepared them or what. And are actually very nice pictures where the Trapp family girls are actually hammering and building their house in that dress. And I asked Dadi, what should I wear for this affair? And she said, my German dress, which was, can everybody hear? Yes. Yeah. Which was very unexpected, because I thought she would say, well, you're American now, and why would you want to wear a German dress? But I like to wear that dress in honor of my ancestry, and I always have a good time. Which I also hope that you will have a good time listening to my stories, because my stories are not as gruesome and as bad, well, bad, yes, but as we see on nightly television nowadays. And we all think it is so bad, it's getting worse and worse, and which obviously seems that way, but I don't think it necessarily is. Just when you've been down on the bottom, things can only look up, they say. And here comes my joke about the two planets who meet on the street in the universe somewhere. And the one planet looks just so drawn and unhappy and just miserable. And his friend says, "My goodness, what happened to you? So sad, and what's the matter?" And he says, "Oh, I'm having Homo sapiens." And that was, of course, shocking to his friend. And after a while he says, "Oh, don't worry, that passes." Now, there are two ways of looking on that joke. The one is a pessimistic way, and you say, well, I mean, we are going to poison and pollute ourselves out of existence, and then nature can take over again, and nature regenerates, and it's just better off without us. And the optimistic view is, we'll get our act together and maybe make a better planet for nature and ourselves, and have all the music and the wonderful cultural accomplishments that we are so proud of. It would be a shame if we lose it all. Now, there are some good signs on the horizon. That, for example, Germany, that warmonger Germany, by reputation, has had peace for 70 years now. They've learned their lesson. They said, no more war, no more war. And I admire how the two arch enemies over hundreds of years, France and Germany, went together to talk to Vladimir Putin, and well, whatever they accomplished, I don't know, but still, they went there. These old enemies, it seems to me, only the two went. Actually, I would have thought more other nations or more heads of state would have gone, but our international news are not so good around here, but that's what I understood. And the other thing is the nuclear talks in Switzerland about Iran. Well, there are many skeptics that this isn't going to work, and it's a beginning. It's a beginning. And I'm especially delighted to have my Quaker friends here from Newfoundland, right? Because the Quaker faith plays a big role in my faith. I'm not a Quaker, but I'm very close to the Quaker thought. When I meet a brand new Quaker, I love to say to them, you Quakers saved my life twice. First, by feeding my mother after World War I, and then feeding myself after World War II. And the Quakers did so many other things. And I have to read something to you. It's just the tiniest little sentence. It's in a book on something totally different. David, what is that book about?
Near-death experiences?
Yeah, something like that. I mean, really very unlikely to have that statement in there. I have to get my glasses. Or maybe someone could read here with glasses. Can you read it slowly?
There, Jason.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, yeah.
It's a surprise from history.
Can you hear it?
No, closer, closer.
It says-
Louder.
It's called A Surprise from History. All major progressive social movements in the Northern Hemisphere were originated by Quakers. All major progressive social movements throughout the world and throughout history were originated by small groups of people like Quakers, who had undergone an awakening and were possessed of a new consciousness.
Yeah, thank you. Could you all hear it? Yeah. So, the thing is that ties in with Margaret Mead. You know, never underestimate what a small group of people can do. And again, my admiration for the Quakers, because when everybody else said, oh, those bad Germans, starve them out. And, which is absolutely true, and I'm not making that up. Years ago, one could not talk about that, or only very carefully, that the seeds for World War II was laid in the so-called Peace Treaty of Versailles after the First World War. And that they again thought, starve them out and gave them so much reparations to pay back. And they had that terrible inflation that you maybe know about, that eventually a loaf of bread costs $1 million. And, yeah, not yet, thanks. And, yeah. And eventually, if you didn't take your $1 million to the bake shop in the morning, and it was $1 million, by the afternoon, you only got half a loaf from that. It was a terrible time. And that's, I guess, how radicals like Hitler and so could make an inroad into the Germans. They were, now meanwhile, the Germans, they had the Kaiser and the fatherland. And you would live and die for the Kaiser and the fatherland. And if the fatherland and the Kaiser said go to war, you went to war. So finally, after World War I, the Kaiser was chased out, and they tried democracy, and it didn't work. They had, I don't know how many, 20-some governments, and none of them worked. And finally, that guy Hitler came and said, I know what to do, follow me. It makes perfect sense to me, so unfortunately. And I guess people being desperate, they just fell for it. So that's my introduction. You wanted my stories, and so my stories are that I grew up in a tiny backward village, something like what you could say maybe was an Appalachian village. My father, my grandfather, father's father, was from that area. And just like Appalachia here is so lovable, with their common sense, I think, and their folk art and so. And my father, with his nurse wife, they just wanted to go there. And they did. And they had a wonderful time. First, they spoke a dialect that my mother could not understand. But she had a great time, very creative people, and loved each other. And they're dead a long time, but their grave is they still nowadays still has flowers on them. Or I still hear stories on how my dad, just last week I heard one of these stories, that my father came trudging from the neighboring village where he has been visiting patients, and came like 10 o'clock at night to that family who needed his help. So, now came the war. Dad had to go to war, Oh, Dad said, war and preparations for war and all of that took 11 years out of his life. And of course, 11 years away from his family too. And my mother, the nurse, she was left alone with that village, and she says, well, she was a nurse, which is was helpful, but that she always says, well, I talk nice to the sick people, and so whatever she did, I think she had good common sense and was very kind, and people still remember her too. And then came the bombs. And suddenly, I mean pretty suddenly, that little sleepy village was just full and full of strangers. The village was not prepared for anything of the sort. And of all people, some of them came from Hamburg. Hamburg is way on the north, the most world open-minded city that you can imagine. Now maybe it's turned over that role to Berlin. But so they came, and a factory from Hamburg was taken into some empty buildings in my town. And the owner of that factory, which apparently had lived in quite good circumstances in Hamburg, they couldn't even find a home that they stayed all together. The parents maybe stayed this way, and two of the kids stayed in that house, and another one or two stayed over there. And after a while, they finally were able to get together again. And not only that, now came the Eastern Front, moved in from the east towards the west to meet the Americans. Everyone still can hear me? Yeah. And the Russians were very feared because Germany had done terrible, 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 terrible things in Russia, and burned things down and destroyed things and so. And the Russians had no concern for the Germans. And they took whatever they could. And for the Americans, I think they were there, another war adventure, and away from home, and was interesting to be, from the fields of Iowa or somewhere to see Europe, and so they were not really so involved in that. So, under Quaker influence or not, I don't know, but they were friendly with the Germans, even though they were not allowed to fraternize. And that apparently lasted only a week. And the soldiers wanted the Fräuleins, and the Fräuleins were short of men anyway. And with what I said, with the Eastern Front moved to the west, and they, what to say? More refugees. I started out with that before. I remember hours and hours that people in horse-drawn wagons, just plain old wagons that they used to go work on their fields with. And just hours and hours, they had whatever little things they could load up onto these wagons, they took along, but then maybe a wagon broke down or a wheel broke, well then they had to just leave it, or a horse went lame, and they moved in tracks. That the whole village moved together because they knew each other and they would help each other. But they could not stop. If a grandmother got sick or a baby died or so, they had to just move on. And they could take that baby with them and hopefully bury somewhere, or they had to drop out. I have a friend that actually had to drop out, and take care of the dead the best they could. And then also people came from the cities. And suddenly they were standing there in our little town, which seemed to be unaffected, yet it was bombed as well. And they said, well, you have room for us. And my parents took them in. They took them in, I don't know how they did it, but somehow they always did. And after the war was over, and the West was being helped by the Marshall Plan. You know, everybody knows what the Marshall Plan is. It's so long ago, so many people don't remember even. But that was a lifesaver for the West Germans and was a bulwark against the East. The East didn't have anything, they were just struggling along the best they could and trying to build a totally new society which they had no idea how to do. And then was West Berlin, in the middle of the communistic countries. And that was a window to the West. And there was train travel to Berlin, and we could go there and walk across the street and be in the West, and be in paradise, be in Schlaraffien, and they had food, and they had colors and lights, and so it was very, very exciting. Of course, we had to always sign pledges that we wouldn't go to Berlin, which of course we signed and never paid any heed to it. If we were caught on the way, well, we just go back and take the next train or something. And suddenly there was a wall. Now, I should track back a little bit. You know what, that wonderful West, with all the amenities of life, and East Germany just struggling along, and in all the debris of the war. And you please do look at these placards in the back, because they show some of that, what it was like. And I especially set it up that way, that pretty green Germany in the middle, that panoramic map, and right and left just gray and miserable. And so, except on the very right is that rebuilt church, which was destroyed together with the whole city of Dresden on February 13 and 14, 1945, and including that beautiful church. And after the war came down, I'm ahead of myself again, the whole world helped rebuild that church. And it's a big drawing point now, and it's a beautiful thing, and I have some pictures right and left how it was for 45 years and how it looks now. So, and now, as long as Berlin was open, many people thought, we are not going to get anywhere in a hurry, or if ever, in the East. And let's go. Now, you couldn't take anything with you. You would just walk across the street in Berlin, and you were free. And every now and then, rumors came up that a wall was going to be built, and that people couldn't go to the West anymore. And it was very logical. East Germany was simply running out of people, young people, people who were able to go and able to rebuild, and building like that too. We had free schooling, had good schooling, reasonably good schooling, under very, very primitive circumstances. But we got our diploma and we disappeared. And all the investment in the youngsters was lost to the state. And also the young workforce. And kind of, I would have to say, they had to build that wall. It was just mainly that the young people disappeared. And that's when I went to, before the wall came up. Now people say, you know, how could your parents let you go in such circumstances and don't even know where to go, and that terrible America, and challenge me on that. Because there's some nice stories about that. And how would they let you in? At the time, they called it Republikflucht, fleeing from the Republic, which is funny, since it was such a beautiful country, which they were convinced of, why would we flee from it? But that's a German word, actually, that they used. So, and sometimes there were so many people in West Berlin that had to be flown out because they couldn't be on the land. You know, there was land, the trains going to the west, and of course there was the border controls, so they had to be flown to the west. And there, well, they got a little welcome money and a little help, the best they could, and they built up a new existence over there. And I always wanted to go to America. Now, terrible America. When I finally was an American and could kind of like safely go back, they told me how they were afraid of us. And I said, I mean, not I, afraid of us? We are the good guys. No! You're the evil empire. No, you are the, no, we are. No, not you. I mean, each one, nobody was an evil empire, and everybody was a good guy. And I don't know, is Thorsten still here? Yeah, okay. But doesn't matter.
Stand up.
Yeah, okay. So the military might of East Germany wasn't all that great either. But of course there were plenty of Russians, and and then was a nuclear threat too. And anyway, so I was safely in the West. And I used a pseudonym to correspond with my parents. And now and then I knew people, you know, who would take a message from me that I was okay and so on. And that was an accepted thing. That was just, let the kids go. And then always I wanted to go to America. Now why was that? The evil empire, and in school, there was the evil empire. And behind closed doors, there were wonderful stories about America. Like, for example, there is a restaurant, and there is a basket. And you can order a meal. Before I came here, I'd never been in a restaurant. And you order a meal, however that might be, and there is also, with a meal, comes a basket of bread. And you can eat as much bread as you possibly can. How could that be? I mean, it is just as if you go to a bank and as you have all the bank slips laying around, that they have in a bank, have just all the dollar bills or any money that you want, and you just take yourself. Which is really the original idea of communism, which is so interesting, that everybody gives as he can, or as he's able, as he is contributing, as he can contribute, and then he's been given whatever he needs for that, in order to do so. But of course it never worked. I think people are too selfish for all of that. And in a couple of thousand years, maybe we will come to that place. So meanwhile, Baptist Quakers, well, with all their good works, thanks to your reading there, it's a glimmer of hope. The Quakers have that light of God.